if you can start piecing all of these things together, and then obviously you have water availability, and then you have food source availability, then I just think if you found something like that, there's a 100% chance that there's a mature buck somewhere in that area every single week.
What has been like one of your biggest takeaways from a hunting standpoint, especially like talking about your farm and everything, how bucks navigate that, and also some of the other properties, of some of the key aspects that you would want to look for that were somewhat, I don't know if there was direct similarities between some of these bucks, but like, was there any commonalities of like, if I want to kill a buck on a property that's getting some pressure on it and he's going to navigate it, what do I need to look for?
Yeah, for me, if you just set a map of a property, the first thing I'm going to look for is habitat diversity. If I can find whether it's a clear cut or anything that allows for multiple forms of habitat to be edging against one another, then I'm going to hone in on that location and see if it's actually viable. If it's in a location that's potentially not, then you can start spraying around it a little bit further. But in most cases, there's really diverse habitat sections, and for me particular, that happens to be areas that have a really heavy clear cut brought into them. Those areas are really, really good. And I think that also, like you'd said, whenever a mature buck is traveling across the terrain, he's not looking at the plot map. He doesn't have everything given to him from onX right from day one. He has a goal in mind from where he is from point A to point B, and as he moves across it, he kind of has these, kind of like why deer produce signpost scrapes. And whenever they see this, then they kind of like re-engineer in their brain that this is exactly where I am, like I thought I was, and then they can continue to base off of that. Same thing with clear-cut edges, where whenever they make it to a clear-cut edge, it's almost as if it's just like this barrier, where I'm walking through the woods and I go up this ridge and kind of, and really not on the same trail every single time towards the clear-cut. They can be within a 50-yard variance towards the clear-cut. But once they hit the clear-cut edge, then it's like this wall hits, and then they just turn and they walk along the clear-cut edge all of a sudden. So they have re-engineered in their brain where they are at that very moment.
So that's like a focal point of travel, is like those edges like that. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, 100%.
So like they could be coming from different areas, but at some point, if there's that habitat there, and I want to figure out what would make it viable versus not viable, which I'll get your answer in a second, but
yeah,
those... Is it more the corners or just the edge of the clear cuts is more that focal area for the travel?
I just think just the edge of the clear cut in general. Just walking until they kind of run into it type situation. And then once they hit it, then they use that to travel around very, very consistently.
And then they also have the security cover of the clear cut they can bounce through, bounce out of with travel, and also bedding, browse. You have a lot. That makes a lot of sense. We had a lot of clear cut country down here, so it's interesting to hear that.
Well, that's interesting too. Like there's some places that we've been hunting for a couple years now. And over the last, really especially last year, I've been trying to do more of this where when I leave the truck, I'm not looking at my phone at all. Mm-hmm. And I'm just walking through the woods and I'm trying to figure it out, just like how I did when I was a kid before I had onX or anything. Just walking through the woods and being like, okay, I know I need to hit this ridge. And then when I get up there, I should see this. And then you kind of don't know where you're at until you hit that thing. You're like, okay, here I am. Now I need to turn. And you're saying that just deer do the exact same.
Oh, yeah. Same thing applies.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, what makes one clear cut viable compared to another based off location?
Well, I think that just depends on, how secluded this section is. If this habitat diversity takes place in your backyard right next to your house, then it's probably not going to be too viable. Whereas if it's kind of off deep in a section of timber, and then if you can start piecing one of these sections of, like say you have 3 sections of diverse habitat all piled in one area, and then maybe there's a saddle off to the west, and there's a saddle off to the north of this section. There's a drainage that runs down to the south, and then on the other side of that saddle, there's another drainage that runs down. If you can start piecing all of these things together, and then obviously you have water availability, and then you have food source availability, then I just think if you found something like that, there's a 100% chance that there's a mature buck somewhere in that area every single week.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Also, when it comes to travel, I want to stay in the clear cut conversation for a second here, just because it's relatable to us, a lot of our, especially our southern listeners. I mean, you've driven through Alabama now for a little bit. It's pine country for a lot of it. There's parts of the southeast that aren't that, but tons of clear cutting activity. And there's a lot of people that complain about clear cutting because, especially after a couple of years, it's kind of hard to rifle hunt, but still a great habitat edge, bedding, browse, all that kind of stuff. What else did you learn about clear cuts that is something that is worth noting that maybe people should be paying attention to?
Yeah. Well, for one, a lot of does really like to bed just kind of on the edges of it, but very few times did I see a mature buck walk directly through a clear cut. Very rarely did I ever see that. The times that I did, I think there was this one clear cut where there was a drainage that ran right up against the other side of it, and this drainage was crazy steep all the way across it, but right in the middle of it, there was a section that was a bench built right inside of that drainage. The drainage kind of dropped down in it, and then it sort of did a weird bench out. It was still obviously a drainage, but it allowed for a lot easier travel in that little focal point. And I'd seen a lot of deer make the cross across the clear cut, even though it wasn't that desirable of a thing to do at the time because it was so thick, and hit that bench because of how more efficient it made them to travel from point A to point B in that scenario. And I've also seen whenever a mature buck makes it into a clear cut, they kind of, I don't know if you guys have ever heard this before, but if you go stand in a clear cut, same thing like as a human, and you're set on one side of it, and now you're given the task to walk to the other side of it, you're probably going to look up. That's going to be your first thing. And if you can locate like a big pine tree or something that's off standing in a clear cut, just walk a straight line to those and connect those dots. And a lot of times the mature bucks are doing that exact same thing. They're connecting those dots across a clear cut.
Yeah, we've seen that. We were hunting this place in South Alabama, and it was a longleaf savanna. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in like a longleaf pine savanna, but there's a tree. The trees are real spread out, big longleaf pines, bigger around than a telephone pole. And they're far enough apart where if one of them fell, it probably wouldn't hit another one. And everything in between them is grass. They burn it every year or two, so it's just grassland habitat. That's why it's a savanna. And I was hunting this on the edge of it, and I climbed up on the edge, and I hunted this spot a couple times. And there was one tree that had fallen in the middle of it, and there's this big dead top right in the middle. And man, if you saw a deer cross that thing, they would almost every time go walk right around the tip of that. I was like, why are they doing that? They'd come from all different directions, and eventually I got to thinking about it, because when you get on the ground, it's just grass, and you can't really see to the other side that well, but you can see that top. I'm like, I wonder if it's just a point of reference where they're like walking out there to that thing as like a landmark, and then they can be like, okay, where do I need to go next?
Yeah, that's 100% it.
We've seen other guys talk about that in hunting palmetto swamps, or palmettos are like 3-4 feet tall, and deer can't see over it, but they can see up to specific landmarks, especially if there's not a lot of trees. There's a couple of trees out there, and also guys down South Georgia hunting. Glenn Solomon talked about that somewhere hunting. He was hunting palm trees. And it was like the deer would come to that. There ain't many trees. They would come to that tree and all that brush, because it's one thing you could see. And you can see aerial imagery, like get on Onyx, and you can see all the trails, some of that environment all coming to like specific trees and then spanning back out again.
Yeah.
So that's got to be a good point. I want to get clarification on these clear cuts. What do these clear cuts look like? Because I'm sure it's different from ours.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the height of the vegetation? Is it just hardwood saplings growing up?
Yeah, these ones, I mean, they're pretty tall now. I think that most of the clear cuts that I'm seeing are 7 to 10 years old.
Okay.
So, yeah, and whenever you stand out, I mean, they are really dense and thick. But there are areas where you can pick out those pine trees if you just look up still. So it's not as crazy dense, and it's probably, I would assume it's a little bit easier to walk through than what your guys' is. I'm not 100% sure, but I would like to think that it probably is.
We'll show you one in a little bit. Yeah, you're not going to want to have shorts on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's good. But again, kind of going back to the clear cuts is like a focal point. Seems like something about those edges, if it's in the right spot, deer are going to travel. And which, we've had plenty of guests in the past talk about that. Just habitat diversity, habitat edges is natural places that deer want to travel, especially bucks.
Yeah.
Have you noticed anything? I don't know how big your sample size is. That's why I'm trying to kind of figure that out. Location, of course, most clear cuts, if it's in hill country, can be top of a ridge system. They're not going to cut down the bottom. It could be too steep. Is there anything else about a clear cut that is worth noting from like scouting it, hunting it, travel, sign, anything like that? I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything else there.
For me, if you find a clear cut and it's pushed up against really close to the edge of, say, a field, and maybe in that field the guy's doing a food plot or something in it and spending a lot of his time up there and hunting, but there's a thin strip of actual timber that runs that connection, whether it's 20 yards wide or it's 100 yards wide. That thin stretch of timber right up against the field, right up against the clear cut, that's going to be one of the hottest spots on the property.
Yeah, plenty of spots like that in the hunting club.
Yeah.
Ooh, check.
Which I've seen that on public land too, just openings like that. But yeah, I mean, it's like that standing habitat diversity right there. That's the place you go and you'll find scrapes and rubs and just sign
Tons-
cutting
tons
every
of
direction
activity.
right there.
Yeah.